I grew up on Frankie Beverly and Mays and Shaka Khan and Patti LaBelle and Tina Turner to Parliament, and Funkadelic, George Clinton, the OJs, like all these beautiful black musicians who live these very colorful, vivid, and beautiful lives on stage and off stage. So, I think I want to explore photography like musicians explore their sound. My name is Hakeem Adewumi. I'm a visual artist from Dallas, Texas. I grew up in Ball Springs, Texas, which is just southeast of the city. I grew up as an only child to a single black mother. We're a beautiful lineage of artists. My mother has a beautiful hand with illustration and drawing. There are drawings that she did from old images and photographs of her grandmother and family. So I kind of channel some of that reverence and direct kind of creative process around lineage. I get that from my mother. I didn't really have a desire to become a photographer. That wasn't really something that I started out with. But as I kind of began to explore and become more comfortable with like the room of Lightroom, essentially, like kind of creating my own little studio on the computer, I was like, okay, maybe there's something here that can happen. And like I kind of evolved into wanting becoming a National Geographic photographer or documentary photographer. I went to Nicaragua in 2013, which was my first trip abroad, and I used photography and what I learned in class to kind of create these stories about the Afro-Caribbean politics and culture in Nicaragua. Um, then did the same thing in Brazil. So it was like my starting off point was through hobbyist interests in journalism and evolved into a bit more of hmm, quiet and introspective style. A lot of my creative process starts with research, whether that's like online through reading in books, libraries. Um, I do a lot of archiving. So archiving of like my dreams, archiving of ideas and notes. I kind of use my phone to record all these things that I return back to. So if there's like a dream that I have about something that feels like it's not really complete yet, I kind of go back to this um, repository of ideas.
Or collection, maybe that holds a special place in your heart and really what the inspiration behind it was?
My Juneteenth portrait exhibition from 2021, which is a body of work largely an attempt to figure out how to reclaim Juneteenth to a broader context. Um, in a broader context that relates to creativity, that also relates to racial terror, past and present, and in the future of Texas. That relates to a certain kind of like dark, unknown space of what Juneteenth is. So I asked a few of my family and friends to restage portraits that I found from the Library of Congress's um, Oral History Project from the 1930s, which is known as the Federal Writers Project. Yeah, I'm really proud of how well my community responded to this experimentation, how they showed up with this certain kind of like emotional reverence for what I was asking them to do. To like, I did ask some of them, for example, to kind of read those oral histories or like familiarize themselves with it. But even once I explained my attempt with this process and what I wanted them to do, they really understood like, okay, this is me kind of like stepping into this world unknown, and they really honored it. I think with the kind of presence and emotional maturity and responsibility that I was really looking for. So it was a beautiful collaboration with the folks that I already knew. So this is like, I'm not sure if you've like read in some of these headlines, like these hogs have been causing so much damage in Texas. Like I think in total it's cost like farmers and homeowners in the suburbs and cities, like billions of dollars in damage from these wild boar that are like invasive species to the country and the continent, honestly. Um, but I kind of took some inspiration from that. It's very like strange creature. Has a lot of correlation to some of the current events that we're experiencing. So I'm kind of like illustrating a certain kind of apocalyptic hellscape scene that really dives into the absurdity of racial terror and queerphobia and an environment that is like being constantly extracted from and destroyed, all from the perspective, perhaps, from these wild boar. And I think I've been trying to research like how boar and pigs have been used in Christianity and different kinds of mythology. Pigs were referred to as cops a lot in like the 70s Black exploitation up until now. Also, a lot of the Black Power movement referred to cops as pigs. I'm just really interested in like how this animal becomes this like really ambiguous and grotesque and evolving creature that has been ever present in so much of our history and our culture. So these wild boar have a certain kind of like gene or like DNA that is just constantly like revolting or it's uncontrollable, uninhabitable. Like they're really contained in their own world. They're very protective. So yeah, I think there's just a beautiful kind of like story kind of unfolding with this, and I wanted to at least kind of get it out into the world in some way. I'm still thinking about it and still like toying with how it connects to a lot of different things I just talked about, but it's in there. It's in there. Probably advise a lot of artists. I would tell my younger self, especially, to like just take your time and slow down. Because if you really want to be like unique and distinct, you kind of have to really like put the hours in and get messy and look like an amateur and a novice. Sometimes you can't start out looking like Beyonce's Renaissance. You gotta have your rehearsals, your training, your time in the studio. Don't be afraid to fail. Fail often. Draw inspiration from everything, everywhere, all at once. Yeah. Put your hours in. Rehearse. Look silly. Be crazy. That's it.
When my grandmother passed away in 2016, she left behind a treasure trove of buttons. So I placed them in my work. I put them on the shirts of the characters and also on the dresses. Just a little bit of remembrance of my grandmother. My name is Evita Tezeno, and I'm originally from Port Arthur, Texas, but I reside here in Dallas, Texas. And my style of work is collage. They kind of coined the phrase of contemporary folk. I am a storyteller. I'm a visual storyteller.
I grew up in a bubble. I went to a, I grew up in a black neighborhood. I went to a black elementary school. I went to a black church. And I was excluded from a lot of prejudice when I grew up. All I experienced was family, happiness, uh, family gatherings, and black joy. So I'm painting what I know. So I have these sketches. To me, these are my gold mine. These are my ideas. Well, they don't start off like this, but I sketch in maybe a pad or something, and then I revise and I revise and I revise until I bring it to the light table and I keep doing it and over again until I get the sketch that I want. I get inspiration from the African mask. Yeah, the African mask, that they have the exaggerated lips and the exaggerated nose. But I also do it so as a way for us to be proud of our features. Different postcards, collected posters from different exhibits over the years, and I put it here to remind me and also to give me inspiration throughout my day. One of the highlights is when I went to Spelman College, and I saw Amy Sherrod's work. She did Miss Obama's portrait, presidential portrait, and she's not really presidential, but the first lady portrait. And she's one of my favorites. She's a really nice lady. The exhibit was amazing. Another person is one of my faves is Bisa Butler. She's a quilt artist, and her work is amazing. She paints with cloth, and a lot of people can't believe that it is a quilt, but when you get close to it, you see all the stitching, and she's an amazing person as well. My attorney and I had previously sat down and put that on my list a couple of years ago, that I wanted to be a Guggenheim Fellow, because there's this white artist that I call her a triple threat. She has the Guggenheim Fellow, she has the Carnegie, and she has the MacArthur. And I said, I want to be the triple threat because there's no Black female artist that has that. So I did apply, and I made it to the last, but I didn't win last year. And they said, Evita, you need to apply again. I got that letter in the morning, that email that said, congratulations, you are a Guggenheim Fellow. And I was so elated. You join the ranks of so many people that have gone before me that won the Guggenheim. And it has really catapulted my career. I was on Instagram one day doing a live, and one of my collectors said, I want to tell you how I found your work. I saw an interview of Samuel Jackson, and he mentioned you in his interview. And I said, how could he? I said, I didn't know if he even knew of my work. So, me being the bold person that I am, I DM'd him on Instagram and sent him a very formal letter, said, Mr. Jackson, I understand you talked about me in one of your interviews, or do you collect, have you purchased one of my pieces? 24 hours later, the man contacted me, DM'd me back, and said he saw my work at Denzel Washington's house. So Denzel Washington had previously purchased my work from a gallery in New York. And so he saw my work there, and he said, well, we're going to have to change that. I don't have any of your pieces. He started following me and commenting on my work. And lo and behold, I posted a piece of a couple that he liked. And he sent me a DM, and I responded back and told him, well, this piece is small, so I have a larger piece that I think you'd like. And it was a couple, and it was from one of the songs of the OJs, Ain't No Woman Like the One I Got. And he said, I love it. And he said, how can I purchase it? So I sent him my phone number and my information. And I said, oh, his assistant is going to call me. The man called me himself. Now, since I have a platform, people know about me, I try to bring everybody that I know in to the fold. I'm always introducing my gallery to more and more female Black artists, or even Black artists as a whole. I want not only to keep the wealth by myself, but I want to share it with other people as well. This one right here is the piece that I'm working on right here, right over there. So this is the sketch. And I take a picture of it, and then I use a projector, and I project it on the canvas. And then I start filling. I go from back to front. So I paint the background. The background is always painted. And then I start collaging the figures. I don't have any children, but I have a lot of people that look at me as a mom. And So the pieces that I am doing are about relationship, time alone, uh, friendships, and motherhood. You need a map. You can't just go through uh, your journey uh, randomly. You need a plan, and I have found that most artists that are successful, that they had a strategic plan on how and what they wanted to do, and they didn't deviate from that. And I'm noticing with my career, since I had made that plan and didn't deviate, everything fell in line.
I never use words or categories to or boxes to put myself in. You know, some people would use the words eclectic, whereas, you know, there's a saying that says we should strive creatively to think outside of the box. And to me, what's outside of most people's box is right in the center of mine. My name is Tony Williams. Um, my brand name or the name I perform under is the world famous Tony Williams. Now that's a whole nother story I'll get into uh, when coaxed. But anyway, I was born and raised in a place called Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and maybe you've heard of it. But it was a great upbringing. I'm an only child. Was raised in a two-parent home, and I guess my experience, how I grew up. Both of my parents, educated parents, both hold master's degrees. Um, and so uh, there was a lot of teaching in the home. And growing up in Oklahoma, you ate and drank Gap Band. And you know, it's very interesting because in this time before the internet, when the world was a much bigger place because we weren't connected, sounds were regional. So if you were from Oklahoma, there was an Oklahoma sound, which is why the Gap Band. I was, you know, hung out with them in the early years when they were first got to LA, and they were just like the biggest thing because there were these country boys coming from Oklahoma, this very insulated place, bringing this brand of music to LA, you know. And so it's that type of thinking. Who am I? Who am I here? And what is my contribution to music that is exclusive to what I can bring? And I think we lose that with a lot of artists. So, you know, those are my influences. If you talk about my style as a creative, uh, I loop all the creative from fashion to music to design to everything in one. It's just like I see a song, I can see a song and I can treat a song just like an outfit. You know, a dress down outfit, a streetwear outfit matches a type of song. A more elegant after five dress style is a different style of song, and I see them all interrelated. I go back to when I was probably 8, 9 years old, and my mom was actually a grad student. I think she was studying for her master's degree or something. And we would go to the public library on Saturday mornings and she'd do research. And the one thing that sticks out, and I could always remember, there would be on Saturday mornings, there would be a storyteller at the library with kids just on the floor, and she'd be reading and telling stories. And I was always intrigued by not just the stories, but the art of actual commanding an audience or telling a compelling story. I like to develop my stories as if I were writing scripts or writing movie scripts. So I not only write horizontally, but I write vertically and develop the characters deeply, develop the complete story. I'm seeing movies as I'm writing songs. By tradition, I would pick them up from the airport every Christmas Eve that they would come in. And we had a tradition of sharing our music from the drive from the airport to my grandmother's house. I play a song, he'd play a song. Now, mind you, back in this time, we're probably playing cassette tapes, right? And So we're talking like 2003, 2002, 2003, 2003. And I play a song, and then he started playing me songs from the College Dropout Project. And at this particular time, he played the song Spaceship. And just my natural inclination, I started riffing on top of the song. He stopped it and rewound. He said, sing that again. And he'd play it, and I'd do the same riff. He's like, that's what I've been wanting. He said, I'll tell you what, I want you to come to LA next week. I'm going to have you record on this song. And before, now mind you, College Dropout is 2 weeks away from being completed. So the whole process I was not a part of until the last 2 weeks. And by the time that week was over, I was on 5 songs. I even go back to some of the even big studio sessions with large albums that I've done, for example, working with Kanye. I can remember this, I want to say we probably started that around the Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy album. We were recording in Hawaii, and I remember the first week of production, we didn't touch one key. We had a huge TV screen, and we watched movies for a week and became inspired about storylines, about vision, about what it looked like. When I performed with Jay-Z, we did a song called Artistry. It was performed at the neighborhood ball, which was the after parties where president and first wife would have their first dance at the different balls. And so performing History with Jay-Z in front of Michelle and Barack was, monumental. There's a song everybody knows that features the rapper Wale. That song on Spotify alone has already amassed over 880,000 streams on Spotify. There's also a song, UBUBU, that features local guitarist Justin Lyons. I call him local artist, and he's actually tours internationally with Machine Gun Kelly and doing great things right now. But that song features Justin Lyons on it and many more songs. God placed very powerful musical people in my life at all different points. It was like genius level people that I was always surrounded by at one point or other, influences. And was very fortunate from that perspective. Now that I am focusing more on my autonomy and working independent and working on my artistry, doing more producing and becoming known as not just a background singer or background vocalist, but becoming a vocalist, songwriter, producer, and everything that I've contributed from the back to all of these major records and major artists, and now to be recognized and utilized and appreciated more independent of artists like Kanye or Jay.
Because I am literally putting myself in their roles in a larger scale, and they can see like all these things that I'm teaching them really do play a huge part if they do continue to do art outside of high school. And so that's also been great because unintentionally they've taught me to be a better artist, but I've also become a resource for them in order for them to figure out what they want to do outside of high school. My name is Desiree Vaniecia. I am from Dallas, Texas. I was born and raised in Pleasant Grove. I've taught for the district or Dallas ISD for almost 8 years now, and I've taught every level. So I've taught K all the way up to 12th grade. I feel like being a teacher has shaped me to be a more well-rounded artist, also to be more grounded in the work that I do create. So for me, it's like I never really say no to an opportunity because there's always going to be room for improvement. There's always going to be something that I didn't think that I could do that somebody thinks that I am capable of doing. And that's something that I teach my students. That's something that I push with them. And it's like only right that I take that same viewpoint, and I move in that same pattern. So that way it's easier to have those dialogues and conversations with them. I was a graphic design major in college, and I really like Art Nouveau as a basis for a lot of my upbringing when it comes to graphic design, and the simplistic styles that came from that, but then also the minimalistic wave that was happening with certain art pieces or graphic design works. And so that really kind of like inspired my aesthetic and the route that I was going with a lot of my pieces. I always want to tell stories with my work that are personal to me, but also can be relatable to others. So with my creative process, that typically starts off with like a story. I always write down my intentions behind my work, or like what am I trying to communicate before I start doing the paintings. I wanted to talk about my family's legacy with a set of my pieces, and I wanted to talk about like the small trajectory that changed my family's direction as far as like who we were and what our future generation would look like. And so I had wrote all of those things down. I interviewed my grandma, my great grandmother, and my mom, of course, and a couple of my aunts. And from there I was able to like pick and choose how I wanted to represent that with the figures that I'd drawn, and also like the different symbols I chose to represent in those works. I feel like all my bodies of work hold a special place because I will say that I have the luxury of having a full-time job. So when I'm creating pieces of work, I really want to create those pieces of work. They're not just something that I'm doing off the fly. Like, I'm intentionally trying to make this body tell a story, and I intentionally want to put it out into the world. Pieces of work that probably stick out the most to me is the recent show that I just had. It's called A Memorial for My Innocence, because I was not allowed to bury it. And the reason why is because it was the most strenuous thing that I ever went through. It was hard to make those pieces because I was doing a medium that I hadn't done for a while, which was resin, and doing it in a new way. Instead of it being like a top coat on top of the pieces, my art pieces that I did on small pieces of paper were basically submerged and encased in resin. But then also it was an evaluation on my childhood and my upbringing and how that made me the person that I am, but then also me realizing my children's upbringing and their childhood and the things that I want to protect for them. So it was a very hard therapy session.
You've received a lot of prestigious opportunities, like with the DMA, the Nasher. Could you talk about a particularly memorable moment or milestone in your career?
I feel like that moment just happened where I feel like my work has gotten to a new level. I sold out my first show with pencil on paper. It really was an opportunity that I am forever grateful for, because it was rejected by somebody else for a proposal for a show. And I talked to Dr. Gillespie, and I had already had it laid out. I had already had pieces, sampled sketches ready to go. And I was just like, I really want to do this show. And she believed in me. I say all the time that I want my stories to resonate with others, but I want people to see themselves in my work. And that was literally what happened. My pieces were selling to men, women, white, Black, Asian. And it was just like, I couldn't, and I'm still having a hard time wrapping my head around that.
Every year there's this event that happens on social media, and it's called Inktober. This guy releases a set of prompts, and you are basically problem solving. You're kind of like just trying to figure out how to display this prompt in your artistic style. Typically every year that I do it, I'm trying to like try out new things, practice my style, but also practice like my problem solving, and like how can I really communicate this concept or idea with my artwork. So it kind of really helps me to like plan out, like in the future, say I want to do a show about taking care of oneself. It kind of like puts into perspective, like, okay, how can I actually display those things? What are the things that I can do? What does the body type look like? What symbolisms can I add to it? So by doing this process, it really allows me to become a stronger artist, because I'm kind of playing problem solving without having like an end result or goal. Like I'm not giving this to a client or I'm not doing this for a show. It's really just for personal growth, essentially. However, every year I do sell these pieces for a nonprofit organization of my choice. I grew up with like this love of like service and giving to people, and not really expecting much from anybody, just wanting to help people. And so since I don't have time to volunteer like I used to, I put my money where my mouth is. I feel like I'm established, and I feel as though now I'm in that role of being a teacher and an artist, because I, not only with my students that I teach, but anybody that I come across and they want to know more information or they want to learn something or they have advice or they want feedback on something, I'm always willing to give those things. I always want to make sure that anybody that comes across me, I can give them some type of valuable information to help them in their goals. I also just see myself as somebody who is slowly knocking out goals that I have set for myself and really just trying to be the best version of myself when it comes to my artwork and who I am as a person in the world.
I would like to see more diversity in the Dallas landscape. There is some. We're moving forward, but I would like to see more diversity at the Dallas Art Fair, at the museums. In the past, there were a lot of Black galleries, but they went away, and there was a lull for, I guess, almost a decade. There were no galleries of color here, and artists didn't have a space so they could show their work. I know that they showed at Southside Lamar, and they would show in homes. They would do pop-up galleries, pop-up shows. But now the art scene for Black America or African American artists are changing.
Looking ahead, I think what I really want to see is more investment. Also just acceptance. Growing up in Dallas and now being a part of this new community, Dallas has a very hard time accepting against the grain until it's become successful. And what I mean by that is, like, I have friends who are always putting on these amazing graffiti fests that people fly out to, people come to see. And it's like, it would be so cool if Dallas was part of that investing group into making that a bigger operation, because it's already doing such a phenomenal job, but they kind of stray away from it. And there's nothing, I see why, but also it's just like, why not take that risk? We take risks with other things. We take risk with our roads and our neighborhoods. And it's just like, why not take risks with the art community?
I think there is a great foundation in that, being in the Bible Belt and so many churches in Dallas, and so many of the artists having their roots in church. In Dallas, in the church scene is very profound and very significant. And those artists, they're on every major tour. There's Dallas artists that are, playing auxiliary positions with every major artist. There's somebody from Dallas. But as far as Dallas artistry, I think if we just fostered an environment that embraced a wider spectrum of artistry.
What I want to see from Dallas, I want to see more funding. I want to see more funding. I want to see more support. I want to see better relationships between artists and institutions. I want to see institutions buying from local artists. I want to see something a little revolutionary within the arts funding department. And what does that look like? Making more bold attempts to fund bigger projects. The city should be dynamic and robust in our support and visibility of people across different industries. Yeah, I just want to cast a wide net that says you can do this here. Part of my reason of not living anywhere else and coming back home is because I wanted that to be possible and true. That to have a successful career doesn't have to result to leaving to New York or LA, but it means commanding a certain audience and using your capacity and your gifts to your best ability, and making connections wherever you go, and extending and bringing those people into your home.